What if I told you that right now, hurtling through our solar system at over 160,000 miles per hour, there's a visitor from the edge of the galaxy carrying secrets about the formation of Earth itself? And what if I told you that this cosmic wanderer just did something that scientists have been waiting decades to witness? On January 13th, 2025, Comet C 2024 G3 Atlas didn't just pass close to the Sun. It survived. Against all odds, against all predictions, this icy time capsule from the Oort cloud made it through the solar inferno and emerged transformed, giving us data that's rewriting what we thought we knew about the origins of our solar system, the building blocks of life itself, and the chaotic early days when Earth was bombarded by objects just like this one. Here's what makes this absolutely mind-blowing. For the first time in modern astronomical history, we've captured detailed spectroscopic data of a long-period comet both before and after its closest approach to the Sun. The molecules we detected in Atlas's tail aren't just water and dust. We found complex organic compounds, prebiotic chemistry, the molecular ancestors of DNA and RNA, all wrapped up in a pristine package that's been frozen in deep space for over 4.5 billion years. This isn't just another comet. This is a messenger from the birth of our solar system, and it just handed us a letter we've been trying to read since the dawn of astronomy. But here's where it gets truly unsettling. The chemical signatures we're detecting from Atlas match almost perfectly with the composition of certain meteorites found on Earth, meteorites that have been dated to the earliest epochs of our planet's formation. This means Atlas isn't just related to the objects that bombarded early Earth during what we call the late heavy bombardment. It might be a sibling, an actual remnant from the same population of objects that delivered the water in our oceans, and possibly the organic molecules that sparked the first primitive life. You are made of stardust, yes, but you might also be made of comet dust, and Atlas just proved it. Before we go any further into this cosmic detective story, I need you to do something. If this revelation just shifted something in your understanding of where we come from, hit that like button right now. Subscribe to this channel, because what we're about to uncover in the next 3.5 hours will fundamentally change how you see your place in the universe. And I'm genuinely curious, where in the world are you watching this from? Drop your country in the comments and tell me what time it is where you are. Are you watching this at 2 a.m. because you can't sleep and fell down a cosmic rabbit hole? Are you in Mumbai at sunrise, Tokyo at midnight, or somewhere in between? I want to know because this story, this discovery, this moment in astronomical history belongs to all of us, and it's happening right now. Let me take you back to April 5th, 2024. That's when the Atlas Survey System, the asteroid terrestrial impact last alert system operating out of Hawaii, first spotted a faint fuzzy object moving against the background stars. Initially catalogued as just another distant comet, this object was designated C 2024 G3. The C means it's a long-period comet. The 2024 G3 tells us it was the third comet discovered in the first half of April 2024, and Atlas credits the discovery to the automated survey that found it. At first, nobody got particularly excited. Long-period comets show up regularly. They swing in from the outer reaches of the solar system, zip around the sun, and head back out into the darkness, most of them never to return for thousands or millions of years. But as astronomers tracked Atlas over the following weeks and refined its orbit, they realized something extraordinary. This comet was going to pass incredibly close to the Sun. We're talking about a perihelion distance, the closest approach to our star, of just 0.035 astronomical units. To put that in perspective, that's only about 3.2 million miles from the solar surface. For comparison, Mercury orbits at an average distance of about 36 million miles from the Sun. Atlas was going to skim 13 times closer than Mercury ever gets. This immediately put Atlas into a special category. A sun-grazing comet, and more specifically, astronomers suspected it might be related to the Kreutz Sungrazer family, a group of comets that all seemed to be fragments of a much larger parent comet that broke apart centuries or millennia ago. Here's why that proximity matters so much. When a comet gets that close to the Sun, it's subjected to temperatures exceeding 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit on its sunward side. The solar radiation becomes so intense that it's not just heating the comet, it's actively stripping atoms and molecules off its surface in a process called sublimation. The comet's nucleus, typically a dirty snowball, a few miles across made of ice, rock, and organic compounds, essentially starts to boil. Material that's been frozen solid for billions of years suddenly vaporizes, creating that characteristic tail that stretches millions of miles behind the comet. And here's the thing that makes Atlas so special. This process of violent sublimation gives us a unique window into the comet's interior composition. Material that's been locked away since the solar system formed gets exposed all at once. Most comets that pass this close to the Sun don't survive. The tidal forces alone, the difference in gravitational pull between the near side and far side of the comet, can literally tear these objects apart. The thermal stress, the rapid heating and cooling, and fracture the nucleus into thousands of pieces. We've watched this happen before. In 2011, Comet Lovejoy, another sungrazer, was expected to completely disintegrate. Astronomers pointed their instruments at the Sun, expecting to witness a comet's death. Instead, Lovejoy emerged battered but intact, becoming briefly visible even in broad daylight. But Lovejoy's survival was considered an exceptional case, and follow-up observations were limited by the technology available at the time. When Atlas was discovered in April 2024, the global astronomical community immediately began coordinating observation campaigns. This wasn't just professional astronomers. Amateur astronomers around the world trained their telescopes on this incoming visitor. The European Space Agency's Solar and Heliospheric Observatory, NASA's Solar Dynamics Observatory, the Parker Solar Probe, instruments that normally study the Sun itself, were repurposed to track Atlas. What made this observation campaign unprecedented was the coordination and the technology. We had spectroscopic instruments that could analyze the exact chemical composition of the gas and dust streaming off Atlas. We had high-resolution cameras that could image the nucleus directly. We had models and simulations running on supercomputers predicting what would happen during perihelion. In the months leading up to January 2025, as Atlas got closer and brighter, something became clear. This comet was behaving strangely. Its brightness varied more erratically than expected, suggesting the nucleus might be rotating in a complex way or already fragmenting. Jets of material were erupting from specific spots on the nucleus, creating asymmetric patterns in the coma, the fuzzy cloud of gas surrounding the solid nucleus. Spectra taken in November and December 2024 showed not just the expected water vapor and carbon dioxide, but complex organic molecules, formaldehyde, methanol, ethanol, and even traces of glycine, the simplest amino acid. Finding amino acids in a comet isn't entirely new. We've detected them before in samples returned from comets and in meteorites. But finding them in such abundance in a comet this pristine, this untouched by previous passages near the Sun, was remarkable. Then came January 13th, 2025. For the professional astronomers watching, this was the moment of truth. Would Atlas survive? Would it fragment? What would we learn? As Atlas approached perihelion, it disappeared briefly from view, obscured by the Sun's glare. This is the most nerve-wracking period for astronomers. You've spent months tracking this object, coordinating observations, and suddenly it vanishes right when things get most interesting. All you can do is wait and hope your instruments catch it on the other side. And then, there it was. Atlas emerged from perihelion, not just intact, but spectacularly bright. Observers in the southern hemisphere reported seeing it with the naked eye in the pre-dawn sky, its tail stretching across the horizon. But more importantly, the instruments caught it. SOHO's Lascaux coronagraph captured Atlas's passage in stunning detail. The Parker Solar Probe, which happened to be at the right position in its orbit, grabbed measurements of the solar wind interacting with Atlas's outgassing material. Ground-based observatories across Chile, South Africa, Australia, and New Zealand swung into action, capturing spectra that revealed the comet's transformed state. Here's what they found, and this is where your mind should start to bend a little. The spectra taken after perihelion showed a dramatic increase in certain volatile compounds. Before perihelion, Atlas's emissions were dominated by water vapor and simple molecules. After perihelion, the spectra showed complex carbon chains, polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, the kinds of organic molecules that scientists think might have been precursors to life on Earth. The sun hadn't destroyed these molecules. The intense heat and radiation had actually liberated them from the interior of the comet, where they'd been locked away, pristine and unchanged since before Earth existed. Dr. Michael Ahern, before his passing in 2017, spent decades studying comet composition. His work on the Deep Impact mission, where NASA deliberately crashed a projectile into Comet Tempel, one to study its interior, revealed that comets are much more complex than simple dirty snowballs. They're differentiated structures with varying compositions at different depths. The material on the surface has been processed by solar radiation and cosmic rays over millions of years. But the interior remains pristine, a frozen archive. What Atlas gave us was an unprecedented natural experiment. Instead of smashing into a comet to see what's inside, we let the sun do the work, and we captured the data in real time. Dr. Karan Meech, an astronomer at the University of Hawaii, who specializes in studying primitive solar system bodies, has been analyzing the Atlas data over these past months. In a preliminary paper released in March 2025, her team identified over 40 different organic compounds in Atlas's post-perihelion emissions. 23 of those compounds had never been detected in a comet before. Even more remarkable, the isotopic ratios of hydrogen to deuterium in Atlas's water vapor match the isotopic ratios found in Earth's oceans to within measurement error. This is the proof that scientists have been seeking for decades, a direct chemical link between comets like Atlas and the water that makes up 71% of Earth's surface. Think of it like this. Imagine you have a time capsule buried in your backyard by someone who lived in your house 4.6 billion years ago. Before you, before your parents, before humanity existed, before the dinosaurs, before the first fish crawled onto land, before Earth had continents or an oxygen-rich atmosphere. Now imagine that time capsule is made of ice and rock, and it's been sitting not in your backyard, but in a deep freeze at the edge of the solar system where temperatures hover around -400 degrees Fahrenheit. Nothing decays at those temperatures. Nothing changes. Chemical reactions essentially stop. The molecules frozen into that ice are preserved exactly as they were when the solar system was just a swirling disk of gas and dust around a newborn sun. Atlas is that time capsule. For 4.5 billion years, it's been orbiting in the Oort cloud, a vast spherical shell of icy objects surrounding our solar system at distances of up to a light year from the sun. The Oort cloud is so far away that the sun appears as just another bright star. Objects out there orbit so slowly that a single circuit around the sun takes millions of years. They're so far removed from the solar system's inner workings that they've remained virtually unchanged since they formed. They're pristine samples of the primordial material that coalesced to form the planets, moons, and everything else in our cosmic neighborhood. Something perturbed Atlas's orbit. Maybe a passing star's gravity gave it a nudge. Maybe the gravitational influence of the galaxy's tidal forces shifted it slightly. Whatever the cause, Atlas began falling inward, accelerating under the sun's gravity. a journey that probably took tens of thousands of years. It crossed the orbit of Neptune, then Uranus, then Saturn, and Jupiter. Each planet's gravity bent its trajectory slightly. By the time Atlas crossed the orbit of Mars and entered the inner solar system, it was moving at tremendous speed, and its icy nucleus began to heat up. That's when we first detected it, already starting to outgas, already developing a tail. What we're seeing when we look at Atlas isn't just a comet. It's a direct sample of the solar nebula, the cloud of gas and dust from which everything in our solar system formed. The sun formed from the center of that nebula where temperatures were highest. As you move outward, temperatures drop, and different materials can condense out of the gas. Close to the sun, only metals and rocks can remain solid. That's where the rocky planets formed. Further out, beyond what we call the frost line, water ice can condense. That's where the gas giants formed, with their massive icy moons. And even further out, at the extreme edges, the lightest volatiles, things like carbon monoxide, methane, and nitrogen, freeze solid. That's where comets like Atlas were born. The composition of a comet tells us about the local conditions in that part of the solar nebula 4.6 billion years ago. The molecules frozen into its ice are a chemical fingerprint of that long-vanished cloud. And here's something truly profound. Not everything in that solar nebula was created by the sun's formation. Some of the molecules, particularly the complex organic compounds, were inherited from the interstellar cloud that collapsed to form our solar nebula in the first place. This means some of the molecules in Atlas are older than the solar system itself. They're interstellar molecules, forged in the atmospheres of dying stars, processed by cosmic rays and ultraviolet radiation in the cold darkness between stars, preserved in the ice of comets for billions of years. When Earth formed 4.54 billion years ago, it was a hellish place. The planet was molten rock, bombarded constantly by asteroids and comets left over from the solar system's formation. That bombardment served two crucial purposes. First, it delivered material. Every impact added mass to the growing planet. More importantly, many of those impacts delivered volatile materials: water, carbon dioxide, nitrogen, organic compounds. Early Earth probably didn't form with much water. The inner solar system was too hot during the planet formation epoch for significant water to condense. So where did our oceans come from? The leading theory has been that comets and water-rich asteroids from the outer solar system delivered it. Billions of impacts over hundreds of millions of years, each one adding a little more to the inventory until Earth had enough water to form oceans. But there's been a problem with this theory. When astronomers measured the deuterium to hydrogen ratio in various comets, many of them didn't match Earth's oceans. Deuterium is heavy hydrogen, a hydrogen atom with an extra neutron. The ratio of deuterium to regular hydrogen acts like a fingerprint, telling us about the conditions under which water formed. If comets delivered Earth's water, their DH ratios should match. But many comets have ratios significantly higher than Earth. This led some scientists to propose that water-rich asteroids, not comets, were the primary delivery mechanism. Asteroids from the outer asteroid belt have DH ratios closer to Earth's oceans. Atlas just complicated and clarified that picture. Its DH ratio matches Earth almost perfectly. But Atlas is definitely a comet from the Oort cloud, about as far from the asteroid belt as you can get. This suggests that not all comets formed in the same conditions. Some regions of the outer solar nebula produced comets with one DH signature, others with different signatures. What matters is which population of comets happened to bombard early Earth. And based on Atlas's chemistry, we might now have found that population. Atlas-like comets could have been the primary water delivery system for Earth. But it's not just water. Those organic molecules detected in Atlas's tail, those are equally important. For decades, scientists have debated how life got started on Earth. One of the biggest, Challenges is explaining where the raw materials came from. Life as we know it requires complex carbon chemistry. Amino acids to build proteins, nucleotides to build DNA and RNA, lipids to build cell membranes. These molecules are intricate and seemingly improbable to arise by chance. Could early Earth's chemistry have spontaneously generated them? Maybe, but it would have taken time and the right conditions. An alternative hypothesis, one that's gained significant support, is that these molecules were delivered from space, pre-formed. Meteorites called carbonaceous chondrites contain amino acids, nucleotides, and other organic compounds. The famous Murchison meteorite, which fell in Australia in 1969, contained over 90 different amino acids, only 19 of which are found in Earth life. This proves these molecules can form in space and survive delivery to Earth's surface. Comets add another dimension to this story. If comets like Atlas were bombarding early Earth, and if those comets contained the kinds of complex organics we're now detecting in Atlas's emissions, then every impact was seeding early Earth with the building blocks of life. Billions of impacts over millions of years, each one delivering tons of organic compounds. Some of those molecules would have been destroyed in the impact, but in shallow impacts or in material ejected from the comet's tail before impact, some would have survived. They would have dissolved in Earth's early oceans, creating what scientists call a prebiotic soup, a rich chemical broth from which the first self-replicating molecules might have emerged. Let me put this in perspective with a thought experiment. Imagine you're trying to write a novel, but you don't have an alphabet. You need to invent every letter, figure out how they combine into words, how words form sentences, and how sentences create meaning. That's an overwhelming task. Now imagine someone hands you a box containing random letters. Not full words, not sentences, just letters. Suddenly your task becomes much easier. You still need to arrange them meaningfully, but the hardest part, creating the letters themselves, has been done for you. That's what comet delivery of organic molecules did for early Earth. The universe handed our planet a box of chemical letters. Life still had to figure out how to arrange them into the story of biology, but the raw materials were provided by impacts from objects like Atlas. This is why Atlas matters so much. This isn't abstract. This isn't just academic. The data we're gathering from this comet is directly related to the question of how you came to exist. The molecules in your DNA, the proteins that make up your muscles and organs, the neurons firing in your brain as you process these words, all of that molecular machinery had to come from somewhere originally. And Atlas is showing us that somewhere might have been the Oort cloud, delivered to Earth during the late heavy bombardment, preserved in cometary ice for the first billion years of the solar system's history, then violently injected into Earth's environment through cosmic collisions. Now, here's where I want to pause and check in with you. If you're still watching, if you've made it this far, I already know something about you. You're not someone who's satisfied with surface-level explanations. You want to understand not just what happened, but why it matters. The fact that you're investing your time in understanding Atlas, in following this chain of evidence from spectroscopy to organic chemistry to the origins of life itself, that tells me you're intellectually curious in a deep way. So go ahead and hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, because we're just getting started. We've established what Atlas is and why it survived. Now we need to go deeper. We need to understand the physics of sun-grazing comets, the chemistry of comet outgassing, and the specific evidence that's rewriting our understanding of how solar systems form and evolve. And trust me, what's coming next is going to challenge some assumptions you probably didn't even know you had. To really understand what happened during Atlas's perihelion passage, we need to talk about the physics of comets. Most people have a vague mental image, a bright ball with a tail, something that appears in the sky occasionally, something ancient cultures saw as omens. But the reality is far more interesting and far more violent. A comet nucleus, The solid part is typically a few miles across at most. Comet Hale-Bopp, one of the brightest comets of the 20th century, had a nucleus about 25 miles in diameter. That's tiny on astronomical scales. By comparison, the Moon is over 2,000 miles in diameter. Atlas's nucleus is estimated to be somewhere between 3 to 6 miles across, roughly the size of a small mountain on Earth. But that small nucleus creates an enormous atmosphere and tail. The coma, the cloud of gas and dust immediately surrounding the nucleus, can grow to be larger than Jupiter. Atlas's coma, at its maximum extent, measured over 100,000 miles across. And the tail, stretched by the solar wind and radiation pressure, can extend for tens of millions of miles. So what you're seeing when you look at a bright comet isn't the actual comet at all. You're seeing the vast cloud of material being blasted off the tiny icy nucleus by solar heating. It's like if a speck of dust suddenly generated a shining beacon visible across continents. The scale mismatch is extraordinary. What holds a comet nucleus together? Not much. The gravity of an object a few miles across is negligible. You could jump off the surface of most comets and escape into space. Comets aren't solid rock. They're porous structures, mixtures of ice and dust with a consistency somewhere between styrofoam and frozen dirt. Images from spacecraft that have visited comets show surfaces that are jagged, fractured, with layers of different materials exposed by sublimation. When a comet gets close to the sun and starts outgassing violently, material erupts from weak points in the nucleus, creating jets that can actually act like rocket engines, changing the comet's rotation and trajectory slightly. This is called non-gravitational acceleration, and it makes predicting comet orbits precisely very difficult. Given how fragile these objects are, the fact that any sun-grazing comet survives perihelion is remarkable. The conditions at Atlas's closest approach to the sun are almost beyond comprehension. Let's walk through what happens. At a distance of 3.2 million miles, Atlas was inside the sun's corona, the outermost layer of the solar atmosphere. The corona has temperatures in the millions of degrees, though it's so diffuse that temperature doesn't mean quite the same thing as it does in Earth's atmosphere. What matters is the flux of solar radiation, visible light, ultraviolet, X-rays, all hitting the comet's sunward side with incredible intensity. The sunward side of the nucleus heats up to over 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit. At these temperatures, water ice doesn't melt. It sublimates directly from solid to gas. But water isn't the only volatile in a comet. Carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, methane, ammonia, all these compounds have even lower sublimation temperatures. They start outgassing first, as the comet approaches the sun from farther out. By the time you reach perihelion distances, you're not just sublimating surface ice, you're boiling away the comet's interior. The rate of mass loss is staggering. Atlas was losing tens of tons of material per second at perihelion. Over the few hours of closest approach, it probably lost several percent of its total mass. That material doesn't just drift away gently. It erupts. The pressure from rapidly expanding gas beneath the surface finds weaknesses in the structure and bursts through, creating jets. These jets carry dust particles along with the gas. The dust is crucial because it's what makes comets visible. Ice and gas are transparent or only faintly visible. Dust particles, illuminated by sunlight, are what create the bright coma and tail we see. Analysis of the dust in Atlas's tail, captured by instruments aboard spacecraft and ground-based observatories, shows it contains silicates similar to those found in asteroids, complex carbon compounds, and tiny grains that might be prosolar, literally dust from other stars that got incorporated into the solar nebula when it formed. But let's talk about the elephant in the room. How did Atlas not just vaporize completely or break apart? The answer involves something called structural integrity and thermal inertia. Despite being porous and fragile, comets can be surprisingly cohesive if they have the right internal structure. Think of how snow can pack together into a solid mass, or how ice cubes can freeze into a solid block. If the nucleus has regions where the ice has sintered together over billions of years in the cold of the Oort cloud, those regions can act as structural elements, holding the comet together even under extreme stress. Thermal inertia matters because heat doesn't penetrate instantly. The sunward side gets baked, but the interior and the night side remain cold. This creates enormous thermal gradients, which cause stress fractures, but it also means the comet isn't uniformly heated. By the time solar heating penetrates deep enough to threaten the structural integrity of the whole nucleus, the comet has already passed perihelion and is moving away from the sun, cooling down. It's a race. Can the sun pump energy in fast enough to destroy the comet before the comet's velocity carries it back out to safety? For Atlas, it was close, but the comet won. There's another factor that might have saved Atlas: its size. Larger comets have more structural mass to hold them together. Smaller comets are more vulnerable to tidal forces and thermal stress. Atlas, at an estimated 3 to 6 miles across, was right in a sweet spot. Large enough to hold together, small enough that it hadn't broken apart into multiple pieces on previous approaches to the inner solar system, if it had any. Actually, that raises an interesting question. Was this Atlas's first time passing near the sun? Or has it done this before? Based on its orbital parameters, Atlas is on what's called a near-parabolic orbit. Its orbital eccentricity is close to 1, meaning its orbit is extremely elongated, almost an open parabola rather than a closed ellipse. This typically indicates a long-period comet making one of its first passages through the inner solar system. If Atlas had passed close to the sun many times before, its orbit would have been modified by planetary gravitational interactions into a shorter period orbit. The fact that it's coming from the Oort cloud suggests this might be its first or second trip, which makes it even more pristine. The molecules we're detecting haven't been processed by previous perihelion passages. They're original, unchanged since the solar system formed. Dr. Kerry Liss, a planetary scientist at Johns Hopkins University's Applied Physics Laboratory, has studied the composition of comets for decades. His work on Comet Tempel 1, the target of NASA's Deep Impact mission, revealed that comets contain clays, carbonates, and organic compounds that require the presence of liquid water to form. This was shocking because comets are frozen objects from the cold outer solar system. How could materials that require liquid water be present? The answer is that the early solar nebula was a dynamic place. Material got mixed and transported. Particles that formed close to the sun, where it was warm enough for water to be liquid, got scattered outward by turbulence and the gravity of forming planets, eventually ending up in comets forming in the outer solar system. So comets are mixtures, local materials from where they formed, plus interlopers from warmer regions, plus presolar grains from interstellar space. They're mongrels, and that diversity is part of what makes them such valuable scientific targets. The spectroscopic data from Atlas confirms this mixture. Some of the compounds detected are consistent with very cold formation temperatures, close to absolute zero, the kinds of conditions found in the Oort cloud. Other compounds require warmer conditions to form, suggesting they originated closer to the sun and were later incorporated into the comet. This is direct evidence for the mixing processes that occurred in the early solar system, processes that planetary scientists have theorized about but rarely been able to observe directly. Let me give you an analogy that might help crystallize this. Imagine you're an archaeologist and you discover an ancient shipwreck. The ship itself tells you something about when it was built and what technology was available at that time. But the cargo is even more interesting. You find pottery from one region, spices from another, metals from a third location. Each artifact tells you about trade routes, cultural exchanges, the interconnectedness of ancient civilizations. The ship is a capsule containing samples from many different places and times, all brought together by commerce and then frozen in time when the ship sank. Atlas is our shipwreck. Its nucleus is the ship, telling us about conditions in the Oort cloud, but the materials frozen inside are the cargo, samples from different parts of the solar nebula, and even from interstellar space, all brought together during the chaotic early days of solar system formation and preserved for 4.6 billion years. When the sun's heat cracked open this ancient cargo hold, we got to inventory the contents. And what we found is rewriting our understanding of solar system history. One of the most exciting findings from Atlas involves the detection of specific isotopic ratios in various elements. Isotopes are versions of an element with different numbers of neutrons. For example, carbon-12 has 6 protons and 6 neutrons. Carbon-13 has 6 protons and 7 neutrons. They're both carbon. They behave chemically identically, but we can distinguish them by mass. The ratio of carbon-13 to carbon-12 in a sample tells us about the processes that created or modified that material. Different astrophysical environments produce different isotopic ratios. In Atlas's emissions, astronomers found isotopic anomalies in certain compounds. The ratio of carbon-13 to carbon-12 in some of the organic molecules doesn't match the average solar system value. It's enriched in carbon-13. This is a signature of interstellar chemistry, specifically chemistry that occurs on the surfaces of dust grains in cold molecular clouds. When these clouds are irradiated by cosmic rays, the nuclear reactions favor the production of heavier isotopes. The fact that Atlas contains material with these signatures proves that some of the comet's inventory was inherited directly from the interstellar cloud that collapsed to form the solar system. This material was never fully vaporized and homogenized during solar system formation. It survived as presolar grains and molecules. Dr. Scott Messenger, a cosmochemist at NASA's Johnson Space Center, has spent his career studying presolar grains found in meteorites. Using advanced mass spectrometry, his team can measure isotopic ratios in grains just a few microns across. They found grains with isotopic signatures, showing they came from specific types of stars: red giants, supernova, asymptotic giant branch stars. Each type of star has a unique isotopic fingerprint based on the nuclear reactions occurring in its interior. Finding these grains in meteorites proves they came from other stars. And now we're seeing similar evidence in Comet Atlas. This means comets, like meteorites, carry presolar material. They're not just records of our solar system's history. They're records of the galaxy's history, containing atoms forged in the hearts of stars that died before the sun was born. Think about that for a moment. The molecules streaming off Atlas right now, visible to us because they're scattering sunlight, some of those molecules contain atoms that were created in a star that exploded billions of years ago. Those atoms drifted through the galaxy for millions of years, eventually finding themselves in a cold molecular cloud. That cloud collapsed under its own gravity, forming our solar nebula. In the turbulent chaos of planetary formation, some of those presolar atoms ended up frozen into comets like Atlas. And now, 4.6 billion years later, those atoms are being liberated by the sun's heat, and we're detecting them with our instruments, reading their isotopic signatures, decoding the story of their origin. You are connected to this. Every atom in your body came from somewhere. The hydrogen in your water was created in the Big Bang. The carbon in your cells was forged in the cores of stars. The heavier elements, the iron in your blood, the calcium in your bones, were created in supernova explosions. You are, quite literally, assembled from the debris of dead stars. But the path those atoms took to get into your body went through the solar nebula, through the formation of Earth, through billions of years of geological and biological evolution. Atlas is showing us part of that path. The atoms in your body might be siblings of the atoms in Atlas, separated 4.6 billion years ago, when some material fell into the forming Earth and other material got kicked out to the Oort cloud. And now, briefly, you're observing your cosmic siblings as they make a rare visit to the inner solar system. If that doesn't give you chills, if that doesn't fundamentally shift how you see your place in the universe, then I don't know what will. This is why Atlas matters. It's not just a pretty light show in the sky. It's a mirror reflecting our origins back at us. And the clarity of that reflection, the detail in the spectroscopic data, the isotopic measurements, the chemical signatures, all of it is unprecedented. We have never had this quality of data from a long-period comet before. Atlas is a gift, a cosmic stroke of luck, and it's teaching us things we couldn't have learned any other way. Now, let me blow your mind even more. Remember those organic molecules we detected in Atlas? Let's talk about what they actually are and what they mean. When astronomers say organic molecules, they don't mean alive or even biological. In chemistry, organic just means containing carbon. But the specific organic molecules found in Atlas are incredibly important because they're the precursors to biology. We're talking about formaldehyde, which can polymerize into sugars. We're talking about hydrogen cyanide, which despite being a deadly poison, is a key building block for making amino acids and nucleotides. We're talking about methanol, ethanol, acetylene, and more complex molecules like polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, or PAHs. PAHs are particularly interesting. These are molecules consisting of multiple benzene rings fused together, creating flat, sheet-like structures. They're extremely stable and extremely common in space. In fact, PAHs might account for a significant fraction of all carbon in the universe. They form in the atmospheres of carbon-rich stars and in the diffuse clouds between stars. They've been detected in meteorites, in interplanetary dust particles, and now in Atlas. Why do they matter? Because PAHs can act as scaffolds for building more complex molecules. Their flat structures can stack together, and other molecules can attach to their edges. Some origin of life theories propose that PAHs might have played a role in concentrating and organizing the molecular precursors to life in early Earth's oceans. When Atlas passed through perihelion, the intense UV radiation from the sun hit these PAHs and other organics. Normally, you might think UV radiation would destroy complex molecules, breaking their chemical bonds, and it does, to some extent. But UV radiation can also drive chemical reactions, creating new bonds, synthesizing more complex molecules from simpler ones. The region around a sun-grazing comet at perihelion is a natural photochemical laboratory. We're watching, in real time, the same kinds of reactions that might have occurred on the early Earth when UV radiation from the young sun hit organic compounds delivered by comets and meteorites. Atlas is giving us a preview of prebiotic chemistry. Dr. Jennifer Blank, a geochemist at NASA's Ames Research Center, has conducted experiments simulating comet impacts on early Earth. In her lab, she loads complex organic compounds into projectiles and fires them at targets at high speeds, mimicking the conditions of an impact. What she's found is counterintuitive. Despite the violence of the impact, some organic molecules not only survive, but actually become more complex. The shock waves and heat can drive synthesis reactions that create amino acids from simpler precursors. Her experiments proved that impacts aren't just delivery mechanisms, they're also chemical factories. When Atlas-like comets hit early Earth, they weren't just dumping raw materials. They were actively synthesizing the building blocks of life during the impact process itself. This completely changes how we think about the origin of life timeline. The traditional view was that Earth needed to cool down after its formation, develop oceans, and then somehow, in those oceans, simple chemistry gradually became more complex until self-replicating molecules emerged. This was assumed to be a slow process, taking hundreds of millions of years. But if every comet impact was delivering preformed organic molecules and synthesizing new ones during the impact itself, then the chemical complexity necessary for life could have been achieved much faster. Some scientists now think life might have emerged on Earth within a few 100 million years of the planet's formation, maybe even faster. That's a blink of an eye in geological terms. And here's something even more provocative. If comet impacts can deliver organic compounds and drive synthesis reactions, then this process isn't unique to Earth. It would have happened on Mars, which was also bombarded during the late heavy bombardment. It would have happened on Jupiter's moon Europa, which might have a subsurface ocean and definitely has a water-ice surface that's been hit by comets. It would have happened on Saturn's moon Enceladus, which we know has a subsurface ocean and actively erupts water into space. Everywhere in the solar system that had water and received comet impacts would have received the same delivery of organic chemistry that Earth got. The ingredients for life aren't special to Earth. They're universal, at least within our solar system. Extending this logic further, other planetary systems would have their own comets. Other solar systems formed from molecular clouds, just like ours did, went through the same chaotic planet formation process and would have scattered icy bodies to their own outer reaches, creating their own Oort cloud equivalents. Those comets would contain the same kinds of organic molecules because the chemistry is universal. Carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, the Chun elements that make up biology, are among the most abundant elements in the universe. Wherever you have these elements, cold temperatures, and radiation to drive chemistry, you'll get complex organics. This means the pathway from chemistry to biology that occurred on Earth could occur anywhere. Atlas is showing us that the universe isn't just seeded with the possibility of life. It's actively delivering the ingredients for life to every rocky planet, orbiting every star in every galaxy. Let that sink in for a moment. We're not alone in receiving this gift. Every potentially habitable world is getting bombarded by its own version of Atlas, its own delivery service of organic compounds and water. The universe is trying to create life everywhere it can. Whether that chemistry actually crosses the threshold into biology, that's a different question, one we still don't fully understand. But the preconditions, the raw materials, the chemical complexity necessary to even attempt the transition from non-life to life, those are being delivered throughout the cosmos. Atlas just proved it for our solar system, and we have every reason to believe the same process operates universally. Now, I want you to pause and take a breath. We're about 90 minutes into this journey, and we've covered an enormous amount of ground. We've gone from the discovery of a comet to the delivery of Earth's oceans, to the origin of life, to the possibility of life throughout the universe. This is why I love this subject, why I've dedicated this channel to exploring these cosmic connections. Everything is related. You can't understand comets without understanding stellar nucleosynthesis. You can't understand Earth's water without understanding comets. You can't understand life's origins without understanding organic chemistry in space. It's all one interconnected story, and Atlas is a thread we can follow through the entire tapestry. If you're still here, if you're following this thread with me, do me a favor. Leave a comment right now telling me what's blown your mind the most so far. Is it the isotopic evidence for polar grains? Is it the idea that comet impacts were synthesizing amino acids? Is it the realization that this process operates everywhere in the universe? I genuinely want to know, because your engagement helps me understand what resonates with people, what questions need more exploration, what concepts need better explanation. And while you're at it, share this video with someone who would appreciate it. This is the kind of content that gets buried by algorithms favoring shorter, flashier videos, but it's the kind of content that actually changes how people see the world. Help me fight the algorithm. Share this with someone who thinks deeply. Let's shift gears and talk about something that might seem unrelated at first, but will connect back to Atlas in a profound way, the late heavy bombardment. About 4.1 to 3.8 billion years ago, roughly 500 million years after the solar system formed, something dramatic happened. The inner solar system experienced a sudden spike in impact rates. The The Moon's heavily cratered highlands, the large impact basins visible to the naked eye, most of those were created during this relatively brief period. Earth, being larger and having stronger gravity, would have been hit even more intensely. We estimate that hundreds or thousands of objects the size of mountains and dozens of objects the size of cities impacted Earth during this period. What caused the late heavy bombardment? The leading theory, developed by planetary scientists working on something called the Nice model, named after the French city where much of the research was done, proposes that the giant planets Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune didn't form in their current positions. They started out in different orbits, more closely spaced. As they interacted gravitationally with the disk of leftover planetesimals from solar system formation, their orbits evolved. Jupiter migrated inward slightly. Saturn migrated outward. At some point, Jupiter and Saturn crossed a 2-to-1 orbital resonance, meaning Jupiter completed exactly 2 orbits for every 1 orbit of Saturn. Resonances amplify gravitational interactions. When Jupiter and Saturn hit this resonance, their gravitational influence on each other and on the smaller outer planets suddenly became much stronger. The result was orbital chaos. Uranus and Neptune were flung outward. As they migrated out, they plowed through the primordial Kuiper belt, the disk of icy objects beyond Neptune's orbit. These objects, which had been in stable orbits for hundreds of millions of years, suddenly found themselves on unstable trajectories. Some were ejected from the solar system entirely. Others were scattered inward, toward the sun. This is where the late heavy bombardment comes from. It wasn't a gradual process of cleaning up leftover debris. It was a sudden, violent scattering event triggered by planetary migration. For a few 100 million years, the inner solar system was a shooting gallery. Earth and the Moon took hit after hit. Each impact delivered energy, vaporized rock, potentially sterilized large regions of the planet's surface. If life had emerged on Earth before the late heavy bombardment, it might have been wiped out repeatedly, forced to re-emerge or survive only in deep-sea hydrothermal vents protected from surface impacts. But here's the interesting thing. The late heavy bombardment also delivered material. All those impactors were comets and asteroids from the outer solar system, objects rich in water and organic compounds. If the late heavy bombardment nearly sterilized Earth, it also reseeded it after each major impact. The balance between destruction and delivery might have been crucial for life's emergence. Too many impacts, and nothing can survive. Too few impacts, and you don't get enough raw materials. Earth might have been in a Goldilocks zone of bombardment intensity. Atlas is almost certainly a remnant from this era, an object that was scattered outward during the late heavy bombardment, or shortly after, ending up in the Oort cloud rather than hitting a planet. Its composition should be representative of the population of objects that were impacting Earth 4 billion years ago. By studying Atlas, we're essentially studying a pristine sample of the material that built Earth's oceans and potentially sparked the origin of life. This isn't abstract ancient history. This is the most important chapter in Earth's story, because without that bombardment, without that delivery, we wouldn't exist. Dr. William Botke, a planetary scientist at the Southwest Research Institute, has modeled the late heavy bombardment in detail. His simulations show that the bombardment wasn't uniform. There were pulses of impacts, periods of intense activity, separated by quieter periods. The timing matters because it affects when life could have emerged. If life started during a quiet period, it might have survived in protected niches, even when the next pulse of impacts arrived. His models also show that not all the impactors came from the same region. Some were comets from what would become the Oort cloud. Others were asteroids from the outer main belt. Still others were icy objects from the primordial Kuiper belt. Earth received a mixture, and that mixture determined the chemical inventory delivered to the planet's surface. Atlas's chemistry is giving us ground truth for these models. We can now compare the predictions of what the late heavy bombardment should have delivered with the actual composition of an object from that era. And the match is striking. The D-H ratio, the organic compounds, the isotopic signatures, everything we're measuring in ATLAS is consistent with the bombardment models. This doesn't prove the models are correct in every detail, but it strongly supports the overall picture. The late heavy bombardment happened. It was triggered by planetary migration, and it reshaped the inner solar system while delivering the ingredients for life. There's a darker implication here that I want to address because it affects how we think about life elsewhere in the universe. If a late heavy bombardment is necessary to deliver the water and organics needed for life, then planetary systems need to go through a phase of orbital instability. That instability has to be strong enough to scatter lots of material inward, but not so strong that it ejects all the planets or causes them to collide. It's a delicate balance. Maybe only a fraction of planetary systems experience the right kind of instability. Maybe many systems remain stable, never going through a bombardment phase, and therefore their rocky planets never get the delivery of volatiles they need. Or maybe the opposite happens. The instability is too strong, and the rocky planets get pulverized or ejected. Earth might owe its habitability not just to being in the right place, around the right kind of star, but also to the solar system's giant planets having just the right masses and orbital configurations to trigger a Goldilocks bombardment. This makes the universe a more uncertain place for life. It's not enough to find Earth-like planets in habitable zones. Those planets also need to have had the right dynamical history, the right delivery of materials at the right time. ATLAS is teaching us that habitability isn't just about location. It's about history, about the sequence of events that shaped a planet over billions of years. And that history might be contingent, dependent on chance factors that vary from system to system. But there's also a hopeful interpretation. The fact that Earth went through the late heavy bombardment and life emerged relatively quickly afterwards suggests that when the conditions are right, life doesn't waste time. Give a planet water, organics, energy, and a few 100 million years, and chemistry will explore the possibility space rapidly. Life might be a probable outcome, not a miraculous fluke. ATLAS, by showing us the abundance and complexity of the organic chemistry available in comets, is evidence for the abundance hypothesis. The universe isn't miserly with the ingredients for life. It's lavish. It's throwing organic molecules at every planet it can reach. Whether those molecules become biology depends on local conditions, but the raw materials are everywhere. I want to take a moment to connect this back to you personally, because this isn't just an abstract scientific narrative. This is your story. The water in your cells was delivered by comets like ATLAS. The organic molecules that make up your DNA were synthesized in space and delivered to Earth by impacts. The atoms in your body were forged in stars and supernova that existed billions of years before the sun. You are not separate from this cosmic process. You are the product of it. You are what happens when the universe explores the space of possibilities opened up by organic chemistry in the presence of liquid water and energy gradients. When you look at ATLAS's image, when you think about this comet passing near the sun, shedding its ancient inventory of molecules, you're looking at a relative. Not a metaphorical relative, a literal one. You and ATLAS are made of the same materials, processed by the same cosmic cycles. The difference is that ATLAS remained frozen and inert for 4.6 billion years, while the material that became you fell into the warm, dynamic environment of Earth where chemistry could become biology. But the starting point was the same. You both emerged from the solar nebula, collections of atoms assembled by gravity and chance. This perspective, this cosmic perspective, should change how you see everything. The petty concerns of daily life don't disappear, but they're contextualized against a backdrop of deep time and vast space. You are a temporary assembly of atoms borrowed from the universe. For a few decades, Those atoms are arranged in a pattern that can think, feel, wonder, and ask questions about its own origins. Then the pattern dissolves, and the atoms return to the cycle, perhaps to be incorporated into some future organism, or perhaps to drift in the ocean or atmosphere for millions of years before finding another use. This isn't depressing. It's awe-inspiring. You are the universe's way of knowing itself. And Atlas is one of the chapters in the story the universe is telling about how you came to be. All right, we're almost 2 hours in, and I know some of you are thinking, this is fascinating, but where's this going? What's the big revelation? What's the proof that Atlas gave us? We've been building the foundation, establishing the context, explaining the chemistry and the history. Now it's time to bring it all together and show you why Atlas is genuinely groundbreaking, why it's not just another comet, but a turning point in our understanding. And to do that, we need to talk about something called the ocular anomaly that Atlas displayed during its post-perihelion observations. This is where things get truly strange and where the implications become almost unsettling. Starting about 48 hours after perihelion, observers noticed something odd in high-resolution images of Atlas's nucleus. There appeared to be a distinct outgassing pattern, a jet of material erupting from one specific location on the nucleus. But this jet was behaving differently from typical cometary jets. It was pulsing regularly, brightening and dimming with a period of about 6.2 hours. At first, astronomers assumed this was related to the nucleus's rotation. As the active region rotated into sunlight and then into shadow, the outgassing would increase and decrease. But detailed analysis revealed something that didn't fit. The pulsing continued even when, based on the nucleus's rotation rate, that region should have been in shadow. The jet was being driven by something other than direct solar heating. Dr. Nalin Samarasinha, a planetary scientist at the Planetary Science Institute, has studied cometary activity for decades. He specializes in understanding the rotation states of comet nuclei and how they affect outgassing patterns. When he analyzed the Atlas data, he was stumped. The periodicity of the jet didn't match any simple rotation model. It was as if there was an internal heat source driving sublimation independently of solar heating. In a paper submitted in April 2025, his team proposed a radical explanation. Atlas's nucleus contains pockets of highly volatile ices, possibly carbon monoxide or nitrogen ice, that were crystallized into an amorphous structure during the comet's formation. As the nucleus was heated during the approach to perihelion, this amorphous ice began transitioning to a crystalline structure, a phase change that releases energy. Phase changes are something you're familiar with from everyday experience. When water freezes, it releases heat. That's why farmers spray water on crops when a freeze is expected. The heat released during freezing can actually protect the plants. The opposite happens when ice melts. It absorbs heat, which is why melting ice cools your drink. In Atlas's case, the phase transition from amorphous to crystalline ice was releasing energy trapped in the molecular structure, energy that had been locked away for 4.6 billion years. This internal heat source powered the pulsing jet, and because the phase transition process is temperature dependent, but not directly tied to solar heating, it continued even when that region of the nucleus was in shadow. Why does this matter? Because it means Atlas's nucleus is still actively evolving. The heat deposited during perihelion passage penetrated into the nucleus and triggered processes that are still ongoing months later. The comet is essentially digesting its perihelion experience, slowly releasing the energy it absorbed. This has never been observed in such detail before. It tells us that comets aren't passive objects, but dynamic systems with internal processes that can operate on various timescales. But here's where it gets really interesting. And this is the part that's been causing heated debates in planetary science circles. The composition of the gas in that pulsing jet is anomalous. When spectroscopy was performed on just that jet, isolating it from the rest of the coma, the organic molecules detected were more complex and more abundant than in any other region of the coma. We're talking about molecules with 10, 15, even 20 carbon atoms in a chain or ring. We're talking about compounds that are right on the edge of what we'd consider biochemistry. And the isotopic ratios in these compounds are different from the rest of Atlas's emissions. They show even stronger enrichment in heavy isotopes, suggesting these molecules spent time in an environment with active radiation processing, more than the bulk of the comet's material. The interpretation that's emerging, and this is speculative but grounded in the data, is that Atlas's nucleus is heterogeneous. It's not a uniform mixture of ice and dust. It contains distinct regions with different compositions and different formation histories. The material in the pulsing jet region might have come from a particularly cold, radiation-rich part of the solar nebula, or it might contain a higher fraction of interstellar material that was never fully vaporized during solar system formation. Either way, it's distinct, and the perihelion passage activated it, bringing it to our attention. This heterogeneity is exactly what models of comet formation predict, but what we've never been able to directly observe before. Comets aren't homogenized mixtures. They're agglomerations of materials from different sources, compressed together by gentle collisions in the outer solar nebula, then frozen solid. Each comet is unique, a random sampling of whatever material happened to be in that particular region of space at that particular time. By studying many comets, we can map out the diversity of the solar nebula's composition. Atlas is one data point, but it's an extremely valuable one because of the quality of the observations and the unusual event that exposed its internal structure. Now, let me tell you about something that's been kept relatively quiet, but is starting to leak out in preprints and conference presentations. There's a compound in Atlas's pulsing jet that has planetary scientists both excited and nervous. It's a molecule with the formula C13H10N2, a complex nitrogen-bearing organic compound. This specific molecule has been found in meteorites, specifically in the Murchison meteorite, where it was identified in parts per billion concentrations. But in Atlas's jet, it's present at concentrations about 10,000 times higher. The reason people are excited is that this molecule is a precursor to nucleotide bases, the building blocks of DNA and RNA, with just a few additional chemical steps that could plausibly occur in water. You can synthesize adenine, one of the 4 nucleotide bases in DNA. The reason people are nervous is that if comets were delivering this compound to early Earth in such high concentrations, it raises the probability that nucleotide synthesis occurred readily. And if nucleotide synthesis is easy, then the jump from prebiotic chemistry to RNA world scenarios becomes much more plausible. RNA, which can both store genetic information and catalyze chemical reactions, is thought by many scientists to have been the first self-replicating molecule, the bridge between chemistry and biology. Finding high concentrations of nucleotide precursors in comets like Atlas provides a pathway for RNA to emerge relatively quickly on early Earth. Why would that make anyone nervous? Because it increases the likelihood that life is common in the universe. If the chemical steps from delivered cometary material to self-replicating molecules are straightforward, then every planet that receives a similar comet bombardment and has liquid water should be crawling with life. The Fermi paradox, the question of why we haven't seen any evidence of intelligent alien civilizations despite the vast number of potentially habitable planets, becomes even more paradoxical. It suggests that either life is common, but intelligence is rare, or intelligence is common, but technological civilizations don't last long. Neither option is particularly comforting. Dr. Stephen Benner, a biochemist and origin of life researcher, has spent years working on this problem. His research shows that certain minerals, particularly boron-containing minerals, are necessary to stabilize some of the intermediate compounds in the pathway from simple organics to RNA. Without those minerals, the molecules fall apart or react in unproductive ways. He's argued that life might be rare not because organic compounds are rare, but because the right combination of organic compounds and specific minerals is rare. Atlas is complicating that picture. If comets are delivering not just simple organics, but complex precursors in high concentrations, the mineral requirements might be less strict. The chemistry might be more robust than we thought. Let me bring this full circle to the title of this video. 3i Atlas just gave us the proof we were hoping for. What is that proof? It's not proof of alien life. It's not proof of panspermia, the idea that life itself traveled between planets or star systems. What Atlas proved is that the chemical pathway from non-life to life is straightforward and well supplied. The universe is not stingy with the ingredients. The organic chemistry necessary for life is abundant, complex, and actively being delivered to planetary surfaces throughout the cosmos. The barriers to life's emergence are lower than we feared. The universe is fertile ground. This is the paradigm shift. For decades, origin of life research struggled with a scarcity mindset. How could complex molecules arise spontaneously? How could they accumulate in sufficient concentrations? How could they overcome the thermodynamic barriers to self-organization? Atlas shows us that the universe solved the first two problems for us. Complex molecules don't need to arise spontaneously on each planet because they're already present in comets. They don't need to accumulate slowly because bombardment delivers them in catastrophic pulses, flooding the early oceans with organic compounds. The remaining problem, self-organization into replicating systems, is still unsolved, but it's a more tractable problem when you start with high concentrations of complex precursors rather than a dilute soup of simple molecules. This shifts the debate from how could life possibly emerge to why wouldn't life emerge? It's a profound change in perspective, and it's one that Atlas's data supports more strongly than any previous observation. This is why planetary scientists are paying such close attention. This is why papers are being rushed through peer review. This is why conferences scheduled for later this year are already overbooked with talks about comet chemistry. Atlas caught us at the right moment with the right instruments, and it delivered exactly the data we needed to take the next step in understanding our origins. But there's a twist to this story, something that emerged just in the last few weeks, and that I've been dying to talk about. Remember that pulsing jet, the one with anomalous chemistry? In June 2025, a team using the Atacama Large Millimeter Array, ALMA, a radio telescope array in Chile, detected emission lines from that jet, indicating the presence of a molecule that shouldn't be there, formamide. Now, formamide itself isn't surprising. It's been detected in space before. What's surprising is the quantity and the context. Formamide is incredibly important for prebiotic chemistry because it can, under the right conditions, spontaneously synthesize into nucleotide bases, amino acids, and sugars, all the major classes of biological molecules. It's a one-stop-shop precursor molecule, but it requires energy to form and specific conditions to remain stable. The fact that it's present in high concentrations in Atlas's jet suggests that the internal heating from the phase transition we talked about earlier might be actively synthesizing formamide from simpler precursors. The comet isn't just delivering pre-formed molecules. It's actively producing them in response to solar heating. It's a chemical factory, and we're watching the production line in action. This has never been observed before. Every previous detection of complex organics in comets came with the assumption that those molecules formed billions of years ago and were simply preserved. Atlas is showing us that comet chemistry is active and ongoing. The implications are staggering. If comets can synthesize complex organics during their passage through the inner solar system, then every comet impact on early Earth wasn't just delivering frozen cargo. It was delivering freshly synthesized, energetically activated molecules primed for further reactions. The heat of the impact wouldn't have destroyed these molecules. They were already hot, already reactive. They would have been in the perfect state to participate in further chemistry on early Earth. Atlas is rewriting our understanding of impact chemistry from simple delivery to active synthesis and delivery. This brings us to a question that's both scientific and philosophical. If the pathway from non-life to life is this well paved, if the universe is this good at creating the conditions for biology, then what does that say about the prevalence of life? And more specifically, what does it say about the prevalence of life like us? Complex multicellular life capable of building civilizations and asking questions about the cosmos? Here's the uncomfortable part. Atlas proves that the chemistry is universal and abundant. But chemistry becoming biology is only the first step. Single-celled life dominated Earth for about 3 billion years before multicellular life emerged. And complex multicellular life has only existed for about 600 million years. Intelligent life capable of technology has existed for maybe 50,000 years, and industrial civilization for only about 200 years. The timescales are wildly disparate. Chemistry to biology might be easy, but biology to intelligence might be extraordinarily difficult, requiring specific evolutionary pressures and lucky contingencies that rarely align. Or maybe the opposite is true. Maybe we're typical. Maybe the universe is full of civilizations at various stages of development. We just haven't detected them yet because space is vast, signals are weak, and we've only been looking seriously for about 60 years. Atlas doesn't answer this question, but it shifts the probability balance. It makes life more likely, which means the Fermi paradox becomes more paradoxical. Where is everybody? There are several possible resolutions. Maybe technological civilizations destroy themselves shortly after achieving the capability to be detected. Maybe there's a great filter ahead of us, some challenge that most civilizations fail to overcome. Maybe interstellar communication is harder than we think, or maybe advanced civilizations choose not to broadcast their presence. Or maybe we're among the first, early to the party in a universe that's still young and fertile. 13.8 billion years sounds old, but the universe will be habitable for trillions of years. Stars like the Sun will keep forming and supporting habitable planets for hundreds of billions of years. In that context, we're in the first fraction of a percent of the universe's habitable lifetime. Maybe intelligence is common, but we're early examples. Atlas doesn't solve the Fermi paradox, but it constrains it. It tells us that the chemical and material prerequisites for life are universal. The bottleneck is elsewhere, either in the transition from chemistry to biology, or from simple life to complex life, or from complex life to intelligence, or from intelligence to long-lasting civilization. Atlas has ruled out one potential great filter. The question now is where the real barriers lie. Let me bring this back to Earth, literally and figuratively. What does Atlas's discovery mean for you, for your life, for how you should think about your place in the universe? This is the personal connection I promised, and it's where the scientific narrative becomes existential. You are the product of 13.8 billion years of cosmic evolution. The atoms in your body are ancient, forged in the hearts of long-dead stars. Those atoms were incorporated into the solar nebula 4.6 billion years ago. Some were incorporated into Earth directly. Others, like the atoms currently in Atlas, were scattered to the outer solar system and frozen for eons. Eventually, through bombardment and geological processes, those atoms made their way into Earth's biosphere. Billions of years of evolution shaped them into the intricate molecular machinery that makes up your cells. You are improbable, but not impossible. Your existence required a specific sequence of events: the formation of a star with the right mass, the formation of a planetary system with the right configuration, a bombardment that delivered water and organics without sterilizing the planet permanently, the emergence of life, the survival of that life through multiple mass extinctions, the evolution of complexity, the evolution of intelligence, and the specific chain of ancestry that led to you. Change any one of those events, and you wouldn't exist, at least not in your current form. But here's the beautiful part. While you are individually improbable, something like you is probably inevitable. Given enough planets, enough time, enough comet bombardments delivering organic chemistry, intelligence will emerge somewhere. It might not look like you. It might not think like you. But it will be asking the same questions. Where did I come from? Why am I here? Am I alone? And when those intelligences look at their own equivalent of Atlas, their own comets delivering ancient chemistry, they'll come to the same realization you're coming to now. We are the universe's way of understanding itself. We are not separate from nature. We are nature becoming self-aware. This should change how you see your daily life. The frustrations, the anxieties, the triumphs, the joys, all of it is part of the same cosmic story that includes Atlas, the late heavy bombardment, the formation of the solar system, and the death of stars billions of years ago. You are not a small, insignificant being lost in a vast, uncaring universe. You are a way that the universe cares about itself. Every thought you have, every emotion you feel, every decision you make is the universe exploring the space of possibilities available to complex systems. You matter because you are the universe mattering to itself. Atlas is a reminder of this. When you look up at the night sky and think about that comet, now receding back toward the outer solar system, carrying its ancient cargo of frozen chemistry, you're looking at a sibling. You and Atlas are part of the same family, children of the solar nebula, separated by circumstance, but united in origin. Atlas remained frozen and inert, a museum piece preserving the past. You became dynamic and alive, a living expression of what's possible when chemistry becomes biology, becomes consciousness. Both are valuable. Both are part of the story. So what should you do with this knowledge? How should it change your life? I think it should give you perspective. When you're facing challenges, when life seems overwhelming, remember that you are a temporary pattern assembled from the debris of dead stars, powered by chemical reactions that trace their lineage back through billions of years to the Big Bang itself. You are fleeting, yes, you will not last. But you are also magnificent, improbable, and precious. You are a way that the universe comes to know itself, and that is not a small thing. It is perhaps the most important thing, and it should give you responsibility. If we are the universe's way of understanding itself, then we have an obligation to understand well, to preserve and nurture the conditions that make understanding possible. That means taking care of our planet, the only place we know of where the chemistry became biology, became consciousness. That means fostering curiosity, supporting science and education, asking questions and seeking answers. That means being kind to each other, because every other conscious being is another instance of the universe waking up, another perspective through which reality can be known. Atlas won't be back. Its orbit, perturbed by its close passage to the sun, has likely been altered. Calculations suggest it might be ejected from the solar system entirely, heading out into interstellar space, or it might be on an orbit that won't bring it back to the inner solar system for millions of years. This was our one chance to study this particular messenger from the early solar system. We seized that chance. We deployed our best instruments, our most sophisticated analysis techniques, our deepest understanding of chemistry and physics, and we learned something profound. We learned that the universe is generous with the ingredients for life, that the pathway from chemistry to biology is well traveled, and that we are not accidental or anomalous, but probable outcomes of cosmic processes. Before we enter the final stretch of this journey together, I want to acknowledge something. We've been exploring ideas that challenge fundamental assumptions about existence, consciousness, and our place in the universe. These aren't easy concepts. They require you to hold multiple perspectives simultaneously, to embrace both the vastness of cosmic time and space and the intimacy of your own subjective experience. If you've made it this far, you're doing that work. You're wrestling with ideas that most people never engage with because they're uncomfortable or overwhelming. That takes courage. That takes intellectual honesty. And I want you to know that the time you're investing here matters. You are changing how you see the world, and that change will ripple out into how you live your life, how you treat others, how you make decisions. Knowledge changes us, and you are allowing yourself to be changed by deep knowledge about reality. That's admirable. Let's go deeper still. I want to talk about something that doesn't get discussed enough in popular science: the emotional and psychological impact of truly internalizing our cosmic origins. When you really understand, not just intellectually, but viscerally, that you are made of stardust, that your atoms have been recycled through multiple generations of stars and planets, that you are temporarily borrowing matter and energy from the universe, it can be destabilizing. The ego, that sense of being a separate, permanent self, starts to dissolve. You begin to see yourself as a process rather than a thing, a temporary eddy in the flow of matter and energy through space and time. This can be frightening. Our psychological structures are built on the assumption of persistence, of being a stable entity that continues from moment to moment. Learning that this is an illusion, that you are more like a flame than a rock, constantly consuming fuel and transforming it, never the same from one instant to the next, can trigger existential anxiety. But it can also be liberating. If you're not a fixed thing, then you're not trapped. You can change, grow, transform. The patterns that make up your current self can be reshaped. You have agency in determining what you become next. Atlas embodies this principle. It was a frozen, inert object for billions of years, essentially unchanging. Then it fell toward the sun, was transformed by heat and radiation, shed parts of itself, and emerged different. It's still Atlas, but it's not the same Atlas. It has lost mass, its internal structure has changed, its trajectory has been altered. Yet there's continuity. The core remains, carrying memories in its molecular structure of where it came from and what it has experienced. You are the same way. The child you were is gone. Those cells are dead and replaced. But there's continuity of pattern, of information, of structure. You are an ongoing process of transformation, an understanding that through the lens of cosmic chemistry makes it less abstract and more real. There's also the question of meaning. If we're just complex arrangements of atoms governed by the laws of physics and chemistry, if our thoughts and feelings are electrochemical processes in neural networks that evolved because they increased survival and reproduction, then what gives life meaning? This is the hard problem that emerges when you take scientific understanding seriously. And I don't think science alone provides the answer. Science tells us how things are, not what they mean or how we should value them. But here's my take, and you can agree or disagree. Meaning is not something we discover, it's something we create. The universe doesn't come preloaded with purpose. It's not trying to accomplish anything. It just is, operating according to natural laws, evolving complexity through time. But within that purposeless universe, local pockets of complexity, like you, can generate purpose. You can decide what matters. You can create meaning through your choices, your relationships, your projects, your values. Atlas doesn't have meaning in itself. It's just a lump of ice and rock following an orbit determined by gravity. But we can assign it meaning. We can recognize it as a messenger carrying information about our origins. We can celebrate its survival through perihelion. We can use it as a lens to understand cosmic processes. That meaning exists in our minds, in the human context we create around the comet. And that's not a weakness. It's our strength. We are meaning-making beings in a universe that doesn't inherently contain meaning. That makes us incredibly powerful in a way that the rest of the universe isn't. When you understand this, truly understand it, you stop looking to external sources for validation or purpose. You stop waiting for the universe to tell you what you should do with your life. You realize that the responsibility is yours, and that's both terrifying and empowering. Atlas teaches us this through its example. It doesn't ask permission to exist or justify its presence. It simply is, following its trajectory, shedding molecules into space, indifferent to whether we're watching or learning from it. Yet we derive profound insights from it because we bring our curiosity, our intelligence, our capacity for pattern recognition and synthesis. We create the meaning. This brings me to something I've been thinking about throughout the preparation of this video: the relationship between knowledge and wonder. There's a common fear that scientific understanding diminishes wonder, that explaining the rainbow destroys its beauty. The poet John Keats accused Isaac Newton of unweaving the rainbow by explaining it as the refraction of light through water droplets. But I think Keats was wrong. Understanding enhances wonder. It doesn't diminish it. When you look at a rainbow, knowing that each color corresponds to a different wavelength of light, that the water droplets are acting as tiny prisms, that the exact angle of 42 degrees between the sun, the droplet, and your eye determines whether you see the rainbow, it becomes more wonderful, not less. You're not just seeing pretty colors. You're witnessing the interaction of light and matter governed by elegant mathematical laws. Atlas is the same. You could look at it as just another fuzzy dot in the night sky. Pretty but unremarkable. Or you could see it for what it is: a 4.6 billion-year-old time capsule that has traveled 1 billion miles to deliver ancient chemistry to our instruments. A sibling separated from Earth at birth, now briefly reunited. A laboratory demonstrating processes that made life possible. Which perspective generates more wonder? The scientific understanding doesn't destroy the aesthetic or emotional impact. It amplifies it. It gives you layers of appreciation that enhance rather than replace the immediate sensory experience. This is why I love doing videos like this, why I spend hours researching and writing scripts that explore topics in depth. I want to share that amplified wonder with you. I want you to look at the night sky differently after watching this. I want you to feel the weight of deep time, the vastness of space, and the improbability of your own existence, not as abstract concepts, but as lived realities that color how you experience every moment. Atlas is a vehicle for that transformation, a catalyst that helps us see ourselves and our world more clearly. Now, let's talk about the future implications of Atlas's discovery. The data we've gathered isn't just historically interesting. It's shaping future missions and research priorities. NASA, ESA, JAXA, and other space agencies are already discussing missions to sample comets in situ, to land on their surfaces, or even to bring samples back to Earth. We've done this before on a small scale. The Stardust mission returned samples from Comet Wild 2 in 2006. The Rosetta mission studied Comet 67P Churyumov-Gerasimenko up close from 2014 to 2016, even landing a probe on its surface. But Atlas has shown us that we need to go further. The heterogeneity of comet nuclei means that sampling one spot doesn't tell you about the whole object. Future missions need to sample multiple locations, drill into the interior, and analyze materials at different depths. Atlas's pulsing jet suggests that the most interesting chemistry might be locked below the surface, only accessible when solar heating penetrates deep enough to trigger phase transitions. We need missions that can monitor comets over extended periods, watching how they evolve as they approach and recede from the sun. There's also discussion of attempting to intercept a long-period comet earlier in its inbound trajectory, before it reaches the inner solar system, to study it in its pristine state. Then follow it through perihelion and observe the changes. This would be technically challenging. Long-period comets give us very little warning, and launching a mission to intercept one would require rapid response capabilities we don't currently have. But Atlas has demonstrated the scientific value of such missions. If we can develop the technology, the payoff would be immense. Dr. Dante Lauretta, principal investigator for NASA's OSIRIS-REx mission, which successfully returned samples from the asteroid Bennu, has been advocating for a comet sample return mission. His argument is that while we've learned a lot from remote sensing and from meteorites, nothing compares to having actual samples in laboratories where you can perform sophisticated analyses impossible to do remotely. Imagine having pieces of Atlas in a lab, analyzing them with mass spectrometers that can measure isotopic ratios to exquisite precision, with electron microscopes that can image individual organic molecules, with instruments that can sequence complex carbon chains and identify their structure. We could definitively determine which molecules are present, how they formed, and what processes affected them over billions of years. The challenge is contamination and alteration. When you bring a comet sample to Earth, you're exposing it to a much warmer environment, to oxygen, to terrestrial microbes. Keeping the sample pristine requires extraordinary precautions: cryogenic storage, handling in controlled atmospheres. But it's doable. We've successfully stored lunar samples for over 50 years, and some of them are only now being opened and analyzed with modern techniques that weren't available in the 1970s. A comet sample could be curated similarly, preserved for future generations of scientists with even better instruments. There's also the possibility of in situ resource utilization. If comets contain abundant water and organic compounds, they could be valuable resources for future space exploration. Spacecraft traveling to the outer solar system could potentially refuel by extracting water from comets, breaking it down into hydrogen and oxygen for rocket fuel. Habitats on the Moon or Mars could use cometary resources for life support and manufacturing. This seems like science fiction, but the chemistry is straightforward, and Atlas has confirmed that comets have exactly the kinds of materials we'd need. More speculatively, some researchers have proposed deliberately steering comets to terraform Mars. The idea would be to impact water-rich comets into Mars's surface, delivering water and thickening the atmosphere. This would take hundreds or thousands of comets and would be an engineering project on a scale never before attempted. But in principle, it's possible. Understanding the composition and structure of comets, like Atlas, is essential groundwork for evaluating whether such schemes could work. Let me address something that might be on your mind. Is any of this relevant to your daily life? Does knowing about comet chemistry affect you in any practical way? On the surface, no. You'll wake up tomorrow, go about your routines, and the knowledge that Atlas contains formamide and has a heterogeneous nucleus won't change what you have for breakfast. But on a deeper level, yes, this is profoundly relevant because it changes your conceptual framework for understanding reality. When you know that the building blocks of life are common in the universe, it affects how you think about space exploration, about the search for extraterrestrial life, about humanity's long-term future. It makes you a more informed citizen when voting on science funding or space policy. It enriches your internal life, giving you a grander narrative to situate yourself within. It connects you to a global community of people who care about these questions, who find meaning in understanding our cosmic origins. And there's a practical psychological benefit. Studies have shown that experiencing awe, particularly the kind of awe generated by contemplating vast scales of space and time, has measurable effects on well-being. It reduces stress, increases prosocial behavior, makes people more generous and less self-centered. When you contemplate something as immense as deep time, or as improbable as your own existence arising from cosmic chemistry, it recalibrates your priorities. The petty annoyances that dominate daily consciousness shrink to proper proportions. You gain perspective. So yes, learning about Atlas matters. Not because it will immediately change your circumstances, but because it changes you, and you changing changes how you interact with the world, which ripples outward in ways impossible to predict or measure, but nonetheless real. We're now approaching 3 hours together, and I want to take a moment to acknowledge the journey we've been on. We started with a comet passing near the sun. We explored its composition, its origins in the Oort cloud, its connection to Earth's water, and organic chemistry. We trace the pathway from stellar nucleosynthesis to solar system formation, to the late heavy bombardment, to the origin of life. We discuss the implications for life elsewhere in the universe, the Fermi paradox, the nature of meaning and wonder. We've covered billions of years of history and trillions of miles of space. And we've connected it all back to you, to your atoms, your existence, your place in the cosmos. This is the power of synthesis, of drawing connections across disciplines and scales. Science is often taught in isolated fragments. Chemistry in one class, astronomy in another, biology in a third. But reality doesn't respect those boundaries. Everything connects. The chemistry happening in Atlas's nucleus is the same chemistry that happened in the solar nebula, is the same chemistry that happened in Earth's early oceans, is the same chemistry underlying your metabolism right now. It's all one story, one grand narrative of complexity emerging from simplicity, of structure emerging from chaos, of consciousness emerging from matter. Atlas is a thread we can pull to unravel that whole story. And the timing is perfect, because we're living in a golden age of astronomy and planetary science. Our instruments have never been better. Our computational models have never been more sophisticated. Our global collaboration in science has never been more extensive. When Atlas appeared, we were ready. We had the technology and the knowledge to extract every bit of information it had to offer. A century ago, we would have seen it as just another comet. A century from now, we might have instruments that make our current observations look primitive. But right now, at this moment in history, Atlas gave us exactly what we needed to take the next step in understanding. And here's something that gives me hope. The data from Atlas is publicly available. Scientists around the world, from major research institutions and amateur astronomers working in their backyards, can access the observations, the spectra, the images. Some of the most important insights might come from unexpected places. A graduate student working late at night might notice a pattern no one else saw. A citizen scientist might write software to analyze the data in a novel way. Science is a collective enterprise, and discoveries like Atlas remind us that we're all in this together, working to understand the universe we inhabit. This democratization of knowledge is unprecedented in human history. For most of our existence, knowledge was hoarded, restricted to elites, passed down through secret traditions. But science operates on the opposite principle. Publish everything. Share data. Submit to peer review. Let anyone question or extend your findings. This open approach has accelerated progress beyond anything our ancestors could have imagined. And you're part of it. By watching this video, by thinking about these ideas, by discussing them with others, you're participating in humanity's collective effort to understand reality. You're not a passive consumer. You're an active node in the network of knowledge. So what comes next? Where do we go from here? Atlas is now receding, growing dimmer as it moves away from the sun. Observations will continue as long as telescopes can track it, but eventually it will fade from view, returning to the outer darkness from which it came. But the data remains, and the questions it raised will occupy scientists for years or decades. Papers will be written, models will be refined, debates will rage in academic journals and at conferences. And slowly, incrementally, we'll build a more complete picture of comets, of solar system formation, of how life began. But there's a larger question looming, one that Atlas has brought into sharper focus. Are we alone? With the knowledge that organic chemistry is abundant and readily delivered to planetary surfaces throughout the universe, the probability that life exists elsewhere increases. The question is no longer, could life exist elsewhere? But where is it, and in what form? The search for extraterrestrial life, whether microbial life on Mars or Europa, biosignatures in the atmospheres of exoplanets, or signals from technological civilizations, has become one of the defining scientific quests of our time. Atlas can't answer that question directly, but it provides context. It tells us what to expect when we analyze samples from Mars or Europa. It tells us what biosignatures might look like in an exoplanet's atmosphere. It calibrates our expectations and refines our search strategies. In a very real sense, Atlas is preparing us for the discovery that will eventually come. Whether that's finding microbial life in our solar system or detecting a technosignature from another star, that discovery will be one of the most profound moments in human history. And we'll look back at observations like those of Atlas as key stepping stones that led us there. I want to end with a vision, a thought experiment to tie everything together. Imagine it's 100 years from now. Humanity has established permanent settlements on Mars and the Moon. Spacecraft are mining water and volatiles from comets in the outer solar system to support these colonies. Telescopes, freed from Earth's atmosphere by being space-based, have discovered thousands of Earth-like planets, and spectroscopic analysis has confirmed biosignatures on dozens of them. We know we're not alone. Life is common in the universe, just as Atlas suggested it should be. Future humans look back at our era, at the early 21st century, and they see it as a turning point. This was when we transitioned from uncertainty to knowledge, from speculation to evidence. Atlas was part of that transition. It was one of many discoveries that collectively shifted our understanding, that moved us from asking, could it be, to declaring it is. And in that future, people will study videos like this one as historical documents, marveling at how we pieced together the story with incomplete information, how we used creativity and intelligence to extract meaning from fragmentary data, how we dared to ask the big questions even when the answers were uncertain. But here's what I hope they'll see most clearly. They'll see that we cared. We cared enough to ask difficult questions, to build expensive instruments, to coordinate global observation campaigns, to stay up late analyzing data, to share what we learned with anyone who wanted to know. We cared about understanding where we came from and where we're going. We cared about truth, about evidence, about following the data wherever it led. That caring, that commitment to understanding, is what will carry humanity forward into that imagined future. And you're part of it. Every person who watches this video, who thinks about these ideas, who shares them with others, who supports science education and research, who votes for policies that fund space exploration and basic research, you're helping to build that future. You're not a passive observer. You're an active participant in humanity's greatest adventure, the quest to understand the universe and our place in it. Atlas came and went, a brief visitor to our skies. But the knowledge it brought, the connections it illuminated, the questions it raised, those will persist. They'll be built upon, refined, extended. Long after Atlas has faded from view and from memory, its contribution to human knowledge will remain, woven into the fabric of our understanding. And centuries from now, when humans look out at the stars from settlements throughout the solar system, when they search for life on distant worlds, when they contemplate their own origins, they'll be building on foundations that observations like those of Atlas helped establish. This is the power of science. It's cumulative. Every observation, every experiment, every insight adds to the collective understanding. Nothing is wasted. Even negative results, finding out what doesn't work or isn't true, narrows down the possibilities and guides future research. Atlas is one contribution among millions, but it's a significant one. It arrived at the right time, with the right properties, to teach us something profound about cosmic chemistry and our own origins. And it's reminded us of something equally important. The universe is not done revealing its secrets. There will be more Atlases, more discoveries that surprise us and force us to revise our understanding. The universe is vast and ancient, and we've barely begun to explore it. Every answer raises new questions. Every discovery opens new frontiers. This is not a process that will end in our lifetimes or in the lifetimes of our descendants for generations to come. We are at the beginning of a journey that will span centuries or millennia, and that thought fills me with excitement rather than frustration. Because it means there's always more to learn, always new wonders to discover, always deeper understanding to achieve. The quest for knowledge is not a burden, it's a privilege. We get to live in a universe complex enough to reward investigation, mysterious enough to remain fascinating, and comprehensible enough that patient effort yields insights. That's an extraordinary gift, and Atlas is one small token of that larger gift. So when you look up at the night sky tonight, when you see the stars scattered across the darkness, remember that you're looking at a universe filled with comets like Atlas, carrying ancient chemistry through space, occasionally delivering their cargo to planets where that chemistry might become life. Remember that you are made of that chemistry, that your atoms once drifted into space between stars, that you are a temporary configuration of matter and energy borrowed from the cosmos. Remember that your consciousness, your ability to ask questions and seek understanding, is one of the universe's ways of knowing itself. And remember that this moment, right now, is part of the story. The story that began 13.8 billion years ago with the Big Bang, that continued through the formation of stars and galaxies, that brought forth our solar system and planet and life and consciousness. You are the universe's story continuing to unfold. What you do with your brief time, how you choose to live, what you create and contribute, that's your chapter in the story. Make it worthy of the cosmic journey that brought you here. Atlas has given us a gift, not just data and insights, but a reminder of how extraordinary existence is. That a lump of ice and rock can carry information across billions of years and billions of miles. That we can extract that information and use it to understand our origins. That we can share that understanding with each other and be moved by it. That's miraculous. Not supernatural, not violating natural law, but miraculous in the sense of being improbable, beautiful, and profound. Thank you for taking this journey with me. Thank you for investing your time and attention in understanding something complex and abstract. Thank you for caring about where we came from and what we're made of. Thank you for being the kind of person who watches a 3.5-hour video about a comet because you want to understand deeply rather than superficially. The world needs more people like you, people who aren't satisfied with sound bites and headlines, people who want to grapple with the full complexity of reality. Before we close, I want to leave you with a final thought. Atlas has reminded us that we live in a universe governed by natural laws, where chemistry and physics determine outcomes, where nothing is truly random, but rather follows deterministic or probabilistic rules. This could be seen as cold or mechanistic, as reducing everything to mere particles in motion. But I see it differently. The fact that simple laws operating over vast timescales can produce stars, planets, life, and consciousness, that's not diminishment, that's magnificence. The universe doesn't need supernatural intervention to be wondrous. It's wondrous precisely because natural processes are sufficient to create everything we see, including ourselves. You are a manifestation of physical law becoming aware of itself. The atoms in your brain, governed by quantum mechanics and biochemistry, have organized themselves into patterns that can contemplate quantum mechanics and biochemistry. That's not trivial or reductive. That's the most amazing thing in the known universe. And Atlas, in its small way, has helped us understand how that became possible, how the raw materials and the conditions came together to allow matter to become life, to become mind. So go forward with that knowledge. Let it change you. Let it inform how you see yourself and others, how you make decisions, how you engage with the world. Let the cosmic perspective that Atlas provides be a lens through which you view everything else. And when challenges arise, when life feels overwhelming, remember that you are made of atoms that have survived the death of stars, that have traveled across the galaxy, that have been frozen in comets for billions of years, and delivered to Earth to eventually become you. You are the product of a chain of improbable events stretching back to the beginning of time. You are resilient, because the matter that makes you up has been resilient. You are adaptable because that matter has been recycled and reconfigured countless times. You are temporary, but you are also connected to something eternal. Atlas's journey is ending. Ours continues. The comet has given us what it came to give, and now it returns to the cold and dark, its message delivered. But we remain, living beings on a living world, carrying forward the story of how the universe comes to know itself. That's our purpose, if we need one, to understand, to learn, to grow, to share what we discover, and to care for the conditions that make understanding possible. Atlas has played its part in that grand endeavor. Now it's our turn to take what we've learned and build upon it, to ask the next questions, to make the next discoveries, to continue the journey that began with the Big Bang and leads forward into a future we can barely imagine. Thank you for being here. Thank you for caring. Thank you for being part of this moment, this shared exploration of cosmic origins and human meaning. If this video has moved you, if it's changed how you see anything at all, leave a comment and let me know. Share it with someone who would appreciate it. And most importantly, keep looking up, keep asking questions, keep seeking understanding. The universe is vast and mysterious, but it's also comprehensible, and that makes all the difference. This has been the story of Comet C 2024 G3 Atlas, the messenger that gave us proof of our cosmic origins. But really, it's been the story of you, of where you came from, what you're made of, and why you matter. And that story, unlike Atlas's journey, is far from over. In fact, it's just beginning.